At Thanksgiving dinner, my mom snatched the pie from my daughter's plate and said, "No pie for her, she didn't say thank you," while my sister's kids got seconds. I bit my tongue and left quietly. At 9:10 p.m., Dad texted, "Payment tomorrow," like nothing happened. So I told him the house was no longer theirs, and his reply was silence. When my mother looked at my daughter and said, "No pie for her," the room went so quiet you could hear the clock ticking. Everyone froze, but no one said anything. My sister's boys already had whipped cream smeared across their faces, laughing like they hadn't just watched something cruel happen. I remember feeling my throat close up, but I still smiled. I helped my daughter zip up her jacket with shaking hands and told her softly, "We're leaving, baby." She didn't ask why. She just looked up at me, eyes wide and hurt, the kind of look that doesn't fade. The kind of look you'll see in your sleep later. We drove home in silence. The streetlights slid over her face in the backseat, and I could tell she was trying not to cry. She whispered, "Did I do something bad?" And that was it. That broke something in me I didn't know could still break. At 9:10 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from my dad. "Don't forget to send the payment tomorrow." No mention of the dinner. No mention of his granddaughter. Just business like always. I didn't reply. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, and for the first time in my life I didn't feel guilt or confusion. I felt calm. Heavy, final calm. The truth was, this wasn't the first time my mother, Linda, had found a way to remind me that my daughter, Maya, didn't belong. It was just the most public. And the worst part wasn't even her words. It was that nobody in that house, not my father, Richard, not my sister, Alina, not her perfect husband, Brad, stopped her. When I tucked Maya into bed that night, she held onto my arm like she was afraid I'd disappear. "Grandma doesn't like me," she said quietly. I wanted to lie, to say something soft, but I couldn't. So I told her the truth. "Grandma doesn't know how to be kind sometimes. That's not your fault." She nodded and turned away, clutching her stuffed bear. I sat there for a long time after she fell asleep, just watching her breathe, thinking about all the years I'd let my parents treat me like I owed them for existing. When my phone buzzed again, it was another message, this time in the family group chat. A simple reminder from Dad to send it early before the weekend. That's when I typed back 8 words that would burn everything down. "You'll need to handle your own bills now." No explanation, no warning, just that. I hit send, set the phone down, and waited. I didn't know then that this single message, this small act of defiance, would uncover 2 secrets my family had been hiding for years. Secrets about money, about loyalty, and about what really happened the night my daughter was born. And before it was over, one of us would be cut off for good, not by choice, but by blood. The truth is, I should have stopped going to my parents' house years ago. But it's hard to cut ties when you've been raised to believe that family is sacred, even when it's the thing destroying you. I grew up in a small Ohio town called Willow Creek, the kind of place where everyone knows your family name. My mom, Linda Morrison, was a teacher at the elementary school, the kind of woman who cared a lot about appearances. Hair always done, lipstick always perfect, smile sharp as glass. My dad, Richard, worked maintenance at the local factory, quiet, controlled, and always on her side. Then there was my sister, Alina, 2 years younger, blonder, softer spoken. Everyone called her the good one. She married well Brad, a local contractor who made good money and knew how to talk to people. They had 2 boys, both loud and adored. I was the opposite. I married for love, not for show. His name was Daniel Reyes, half Mexican, funny, artistic, and everything my parents thought was a phase. When I got pregnant, they didn't celebrate. They tolerated. And when Daniel left, right before Maya was born, that tolerance turned into disgust. After the divorce, I moved back into my parents' house for a while. I told myself it was temporary, just until I could get back on my feet. But it didn't take long to see the truth. They didn't see me as family anymore. They saw me as a burden with a baby attached. At first, they helped a little. Babysitting, groceries, a place to sleep. But then came the arrangement. My mom suggested it one morning while stirring her coffee. "You can stay here, but you'll contribute. We're not a charity." So I started paying part of their mortgage, their utilities, even their car insurance. It was supposed to be temporary. But when I got a new job in accounting and moved out 6 months later, they never took me off the bills. It just became expected. Every month, Dad would send me the total like it was rent. No thank you, no check-ins, just numbers, and stupidly I paid. Because I thought it kept the peace. Because every time I tried to stop, my mom would say, "You wouldn't even have a career if we hadn't helped you," like I owed them forever. When Maya was born, they visited the hospital once. Mom brought flowers, the cheap kind from the grocery store, and told me I shouldn't be too proud to ask for help. I didn't realize until later she didn't mean help with the baby. She meant money. From then on, every visit had the same pattern. A little judgment, a little silence, and me pretending it didn't hurt. The first Thanksgiving after Daniel left, Mom forgot to set a place for Maya. The next year, she made her sit at the kids' table with my nephews, even though she was only 3 and barely reached the table. When I protested, Mom said, "It's just easier that way." But this year, the no pie year, something in me finally snapped. And when I told them I was done paying, it didn't just shock them. It threatened something they'd been carefully hiding. Because as I would soon learn, those payments, my money, weren't just going to household bills. They were keeping something else quiet, something that had my name on it, and someone, maybe even my sister, was in on it. The silence lasted about 12 hours. Then my phone started buzzing like it had been set on fire. First came the text from my dad. "You can't just walk away from your responsibilities. We had an agreement. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Then my mom's message. "Really classy of you to make a scene over pie." That one made me laugh. Actually laugh, out loud, in my kitchen, surrounded by dishes from the night before. Because it wasn't about the pie. It was never about the pie. It was about how she looked at my daughter, my 5-year-old, like she was something dirty on her shoe. I didn't answer any of their messages. Not one. Instead, I put my phone down, made pancakes for Maya, and tried to breathe. She was sitting at the table, coloring a picture of our house. 3 stick figures, me, her, and our cat, Clover. No grandparents, no aunts, just us. I told myself that was fine, that smaller was safer. But then my sister, Alina, texted, "Are you okay?" 4 words that felt different from everything else. I stared at them for a long time before replying, "Yeah, just done." She answered almost instantly. "Good." "So am I," that stopped me cold. Alina, the peacekeeper, the one who always defended them. When I asked what she meant, she said, "Come over this weekend, I'll explain, bring Maya." I didn't know what to make of that. But part of me, the part that was tired of being alone in this fight, wanted to believe her. The next morning, I woke up to a Venmo request from Mom. $75. The note under it read, "Maybe this will jog your memory." I declined it instantly. 10 minutes later, Dad called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail that started with, "We had an agreement, Rachel. You don't just decide to stop." I deleted it halfway through. By Thursday, they'd both gone quiet again. But the quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the moment right before a storm when the sky goes still and even the birds hide. And I was right. Because Friday morning, my coworker, Lana, came up to me at the office looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Ratch, I don't know if you saw, but your mom posted something on Facebook." My stomach dropped before I even opened it. There it was, a long, self-pitying post with a picture of a Thanksgiving table. Funny how some daughters forget who sacrificed everything for them. Family means loyalty, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. These days, emotions matter more than morals. 12 likes, 3 comments, all her church friends chiming in about how kids today are ungrateful. I didn't comment. I didn't have to. Because at 3:47 p.m., I got an email from my bank. "Unusual activity detected on your account." At first, I thought it was a mistake, but when I looked, my blood ran cold. Someone had used my old Amazon account, the one linked to my parents' address, to order towels, slippers, and an essential oil diffuser. The delivery address was their house. They hadn't even tried to hide it. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about control, about reminding me that I'd never really get away. I canceled the order, locked every account, changed every password I could think of. And right when I thought it was over, another notification appeared. A new charge, not on Amazon, on my old credit card, the one I'd closed 2 years ago, except I hadn't closed it. Someone had reopened it using my personal information. My mother's name was on the account as a cosigner, which was impossible, because I never put her name on anything. That's when the truth started to claw at the back of my mind. That maybe the money I'd been sending all these years wasn't just helping with bills. Maybe it had been covering something else, something illegal, something I never agreed to. And the worst part? I had a feeling Alina knew. Saturday morning, I drove to Alina's house in the suburbs, a quiet street lined with identical houses and American flags on every porch. I wasn't planning to confront anyone yet. I just needed to understand what she meant when she said she was done too. She opened the door before I even knocked. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't slept. "Come in," she said. "We need to talk before the kids come down." Her husband, Brad, was gone. She mentioned he was working a weekend shift, but something in her tone made me think it was more than that. We sat at her kitchen island, coffee steaming between us. For a moment, I just stared at her. This was the sister who had spent our entire lives defending them, the one who'd say, "You know Mom doesn't mean it like that." The one who'd call me dramatic when I cried after family dinners. So when she said, "I found something," I didn't know what to expect. She slid a manila envelope across the counter. Inside were photocopies of documents, utility bills, credit card statements, and something that made my heart stop. A loan agreement, with my name typed neatly on top, and a signature that wasn't mine, $14,000, taken out 2 years ago, the address listed, my parents' house. "Alina," I whispered. "What is this?" She looked down. "Mom and Dad took out a home improvement loan in your name. I didn't know until last month." I just stared at her, trying to make sense of it. "They stole my identity," she nodded, tears welling. "They said they'd pay it off with your transfers. I thought you knew. I swear I thought you agreed to it." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The room seemed to tilt. All those years of payments, all those months of sending money, I hadn't been helping them. I'd been paying down a loan I never took. A loan in my name. My heart pounded. "Why didn't you tell me?" Alina wiped her face with her sleeve. "Because Mom said it would ruin everything if you found out. She said you'd make it public and Dad could lose the house." "Ruin everything?" I snapped. "They ruined me." Maya peeked around the corner, clutching a stuffed bunny. Alina gave her a shaky smile and said, "Hey, sweetie, go play with the boys in the den, okay?" Once she was gone, Alina whispered, "That's not all, there's more." She took out her phone and showed me a photo, a screenshot of a text thread between her and Mom. "Mom, if Rachel stops paying, we'll tell her the truth about what Daniel did. That should shut her up." "Alina, you said you'd never bring that up again." "Mom, sometimes people need to be reminded where they came from." I froze. What did she mean by that? Alina's eyes filled again. "I don't know, but she made it sound like there's something she's been hiding about him, about Daniel." My stomach turned. I hadn't thought about Daniel in years. He'd left when I was 7 months pregnant, no note, no goodbye, just gone. I'd told myself it was simple. He didn't want the responsibility. But suddenly it didn't feel that simple anymore. I left Alina's house shaking. My entire life, the guilt, the endless payments, the manipulation, it had all been built on lies. But it wasn't just about money now. If my mother had used Daniel as leverage, if she'd been hiding something about him all this time, then this wasn't just betrayal. It was blackmail, and I was done being the quiet one, because I had a plan. And it started with getting my hands on the truth she'd been keeping locked up since the day my daughter was born. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the kitchen table staring at the loan papers, my coffee going cold while my mind rewound every memory of my mother, every half-smile, every guilt trip, every time she'd said, "We only want what's best for you." I wanted to believe there was still some explanation that didn't make her a monster. But forged signatures don't lie. The next morning, I went into problem-solving mode. That's what I do best. I'm an accountant. I live in numbers, in proof, in paper trails. So I decided if my mother wanted to play games with documents, I'd beat her at her own. First, I pulled every financial record I had, bank transfers, text threads, screenshots of Venmo payments. I laid them all out across the kitchen table, marking each one that matched the dates from the fake loan. It lined up too perfectly. Every time I helped with bills, I was really paying down their secret debt. My money, my name, their lies. And the worst part? The loan hadn't been fully repaid. There was still a balance, just over $3,000. If I didn't act fast, that debt would follow me. So I made a plan. Step 1, go to the bank and request all records tied to that account. Step 2, file a police report for identity fraud. Step 3, expose them but not publicly. Not yet. I wanted them to feel it first. Personally, privately. Like the slow dread of realizing the ground beneath you has cracked. Before I left for work, I called Alina. "I'm going to the bank," I said. She hesitated. "Do you want me to come?" "No, you've done enough. Just be ready." At the bank, the manager pulled up the loan records and confirmed what I already knew. "Yes, the cosigner is listed as Linda Morrison," she said, scanning the screen. "That's your mother." "Yeah," I said flatly. "And I never authorized that." She gave me a sympathetic look and printed out copies for the police report. Then she hesitated. "There's also something else here, a note on the file." I leaned in. "What kind of note?" "It says see attached document. Looks like a letter from the cosigner. Do you want me to print it?" My heart hammered. "Yes, please." She handed me the paper, and the world tilted again. It was a short letter, written in my mother's tidy cursive. "To whom it may concern, this loan is for home improvements related to our daughter Rachel's return to the property. She is aware and has consented. If needed, she can be reached at the number below. Please contact her directly for payment details. Sincerely, Linda Morrison." Below that was a phone number. Not mine. Alina's. I sat there, gripping the paper so tight it crumpled. So that was how they'd done it. My mother hadn't just forged my name, used my sister's number to verify the loan, knowing the bank would call and ask if Rachel agreed. And Alina had answered. I drove straight to her house. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the steering wheel. She opened the door, her face pale. "I didn't know what I was doing," she said before I even spoke. She called me that morning, told me to expect a call from the bank. Said it was about refinancing the house, and she didn't want Dad to know. She said you'd already approved it. "So you pretended to be me," I said, my voice trembling with disbelief. "I thought I was helping her. I didn't." I cut her off. "You did. You helped her steal from me. You helped her ruin my credit and make me her personal ATM." She started crying, but I didn't feel pity. Not yet. Because this wasn't over. I was done reacting. I was going to end this. That night, I sat down with every piece of evidence I had and drafted a letter. Not to my parents. To every single person they cared about. My mother's church board, her PTA friends, the neighborhood committee she bragged about leading. Inside each envelope, I'd include the truth. The loan documents, the proof of forgery, and the timeline showing exactly how long they'd been using me. But I wouldn't send them. Not yet. Not until after one final dinner. Because Alina had told me something else, something that changed everything. Mom and Dad were hosting a family meeting next weekend. They'd invited both of us to clear the air. I smiled when she told me, "Perfect. Let them think they were in control. Let them gather everyone together one last time." Because when that dinner came, I was going to bring every lie they'd ever told crashing down around them, one truth at a time. And I had no idea that someone else would beat me to it. The family dinner was set for Sunday at 6 p.m. My mom made it sound like a peace offering, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, just us. The kind of tone she used when she wanted to trap you with niceness. Alina called the night before. "You're really going?" she asked. "I'm going," I said, "but not for forgiveness." I had the folder ready, the forged loan papers, the screenshots, everything. I wasn't planning to yell. I wanted her to choke on silence, the kind of silence that only the truth can make. But the moment I pulled into their driveway, I knew something was off. There was another car parked by the mailbox. Black, unfamiliar, idling. When I walked inside, my dad was already sitting at the table, hands clasped like a man waiting for a sermon. My mom was in her usual armor, pearl earrings, fake smile. Alina sat near the end, quiet, eyes red again. And next to her was a man I hadn't seen in almost 6 years. Daniel. He looked older, thinner, but it was him, the man who'd vanished before Maya was born. I froze. "What the hell is this?" Mom's smile widened like she'd been waiting for this exact reaction. "I thought it was time for some honesty," she said. "Daniel has something he wants to tell you." My stomach twisted. I looked at him, his hands were shaking, his voice low. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," he said. "I left because your parents told me to." The air left my lungs. "What?" He nodded slowly. "They came to see me after that fight we had. Your mom said you'd be better off without me. That if I stayed, she'd call the cops and say I'd hit you." I couldn't breathe. "She what?" Mom didn't flinch. "You were pregnant, Rachel. He was unstable. I did what I had to do." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She gave me money." Told me to disappear. I used it to get to California. I tried to call once, but your dad picked up. He said if I ever came back, you'd lose custody. My chair scraped back so hard it hit the wall. You lied to me. You took away my daughter's father and let me think he abandoned us. Mom's voice went cold. You were better off. Look at you now. You're strong, independent. That's because I pushed you. I could feel my pulse in my ears. Every piece of the last 5 years rearranged itself into something uglier, truer. She hadn't just used my money. She'd stolen my family twice, once with a forged signature and once with a lie. But then Daniel said something that made everything even darker. She didn't just pay me to leave, he said quietly. She told me she was protecting you from something. She said the baby wasn't mine. The room went still. I felt my heart stop. What did you just say? He swallowed. She said you'd cheated, that she had proof. I didn't believe her at first, but then she showed me a letter, said it came from you, said you'd confessed. I turned to my mother. What letter? Her face didn't move, not one twitch. You were distraught, you said things. I was just trying to save everyone pain. That letter never existed, I said. Alina's voice broke through the silence, sharp, shaking. Mom, tell her the truth. Mom turned on her. Don't you start. No, Alina stood, trembling. Tell her who wrote the letter. My mom's mouth opened, then shut again. My dad looked at the floor. Alina's voice cracked. She made me write it. When you two were fighting, she told me to copy your handwriting. Said it was to teach him a lesson. She made me write that you'd slept with someone else. I was 15. I didn't even know what I was doing. The world tilted again. The betrayal hit in waves, not just from my parents, but from my sister, too. The same sister who now sat crying like she wanted to peel off her own skin to undo what she'd done. Daniel looked gutted. You didn't write it? I shook my head. No, I never cheated. I never even looked at anyone else. He looked at my mother, eyes burning. You destroyed everything. You made me walk away from her, from my kid, because you wanted control. Mom's voice finally cracked. You weren't good enough for her. You never were. I stepped closer, every ounce of rage I'd buried for years crawling to the surface. No, Mom, you weren't good enough for me. The folder was still in my hand. I dropped it onto the table. You forged my name. You stole my money. You lied about the father of my child. You're going to answer for every bit of it. And for the first time in my life, my mother looked scared. But I didn't know yet, the real reason she'd done it wasn't about control or pride. It was something colder, something rooted in the one secret she'd kept buried even deeper. The reason she'd hated Daniel, the reason she'd looked at Maya like she wasn't family. And when I found out what that reason was, it would make everything that came before look almost merciful. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face, pale, shaking, but not sorry. Never sorry. I kept replaying what Daniel said. She told me the baby wasn't mine. The lie had been cruel enough to shatter us, but something in her eyes when he said it, that flicker of panic she couldn't hide, told me it wasn't just manipulation. It was fear, fear of something coming out. The next morning, I called my dad. I didn't expect him to answer, but he did, his voice flat, tired, like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Dad, I said quietly. What was she protecting? A long silence. Then you don't want to know. Yes, I do. He sighed, the kind of sound that feels like surrender. Your mother's been lying to you for a long time, but not just about Daniel. I gripped the phone tighter. Then tell me. Another pause. Then he said something that knocked the breath out of me. She was scared you'd find out who your real father is. At first, I thought he meant Daniel. But then he added, almost whispering, Rachel, I'm not your father. Everything inside me went still. What are you talking about? He exhaled slowly. Your mother was 19. She was seeing someone before me. He was married, older, from her school district. When she found out she was pregnant, he offered money to make it go away. She didn't. I married her a few months later, thinking the baby was mine. She told me the truth after Alina was born. I couldn't speak. He went on, voice rough now. She's been terrified ever since that you'd find out. That's why she hates Daniel, why she hates you needing anyone, because the one time she needed someone, it destroyed her. I sat down hard on the couch, the phone still to my ear. So she punished me for it? I asked. For existing? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. When I finally hung up, my hands were shaking. I stared at the wall, trying to piece together my mother's logic. She'd built her whole life on a lie, pretending to be the perfect mother, perfect wife, perfect Christian woman. while underneath she was drowning in secrets. And I was her reminder, the child she'd had to hide behind another man's name. So she decided if she couldn't erase the past, she'd control it. She'd control me. She made me pay for her mistake, literally. She used my money to protect the image she'd spent her whole life building. But that wasn't the most horrifying part. Later that day, I went through the old storage boxes I'd taken from their house years ago, baby books, photos, random paperwork. In one envelope, I found something strange. A letter addressed to Linda Morrison from a lawyer's office in Cincinnati, dated 2018. The subject line, Notice of Contact Request Biological Father Inquiry. Inside was a short letter explaining that a man named Mark Allen had reached out requesting to make contact with his biological daughter, born July 19, 1992, my birthday. The firm said they'd sent multiple letters, but received no reply. The last line read, Should the mother decline contact, we are legally obligated to inform the daughter upon verification of adulthood. That never happened, because she'd intercepted them. She'd kept me from the man who'd tried to find me. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just control. It wasn't even hatred. It was possession. My mother didn't just want me to suffer, she wanted to make sure no one else ever claimed me. Not Daniel, not my real father. No one. She needed to be the center of everything, even if that meant burning every bridge I had left. I sat there, shaking, realizing the full weight of what she'd done. She'd stolen my name, my money, my father, and my daughter's chance to know love without fear. And she'd smiled through it all, pretending she was protecting me. That was the moment the calm came, the same cold, heavy calm I'd felt the night she denied Maya the pie. Because now I understood exactly what she'd done. And I knew exactly how to destroy the empire she'd built out of lies. I remember the exact sound of the envelopes hitting the mailbox. A dry, hollow thunk that felt like the last nail in something that had been rotting for years. I'd spent a week assembling a file thick enough to make my hands ache, bank statements with the transfers circled in red, the loan documents with the forged signature highlighted, the email trail from the law firm that had tried to contact my biological father, and photographs of the Amazon deliveries sent to my parents' address. I had copies of the Facebook post, screenshots of the Venmo requests, and a printout of the text where Mom had instructed Alina to impersonate me to the bank. I had a police report number, a lawyer's card, and a notarized statement from Daniel confirming what he told me at Alina's kitchen table. I had more than anger, I had evidence. I sent identical envelopes, 2 each, to the neighborhood association president, the PTA board where Mom volunteered, my church group, and the small circle of civic leaders who loved to praise Linda Morrison's steadfast service. One I slid under the door of the man who ran the bank branch where the fraudulent loan had been issued. Another I handed to a reporter who'd been quietly following local corruption cases for months. I didn't mail anything to the family first. I wanted their last chance to be private humiliation, not public spectacle. Then I called Mark Allen. He'd been the most difficult thing to arrange. His name was on the lawyer's notice. An out-of-town man who had, years ago, reached out through channels and been rebuffed. When he picked up, his voice was flat and tired, like someone who had learned the hard way not to believe in easy reunions. I told him plainly that I was Linda's daughter, that I had proof she'd lied about everything, and that if he wanted to meet me and meet my daughter, he could come up to Willow Creek on Saturday. He hesitated for 2 beats, then agreed. There was a rueful pause, and he said, I want to meet my daughter, Rachel. If you want me there, I'll come. Saturday came with the sort of cold clarity that makes even the air feel honest. Alina refused to be in the house when I did what I had to do. She said she couldn't watch Mom be taken down, and I couldn't blame her. I was the one who'd carry the sledgehammer. I invited Mom and Dad to a small community meeting at the church hall under the pretense that I was volunteering to lead a seminar on financial literacy. They came because that's what they did, public service, remember. And because they liked to be seen as generous. When they arrived, I could see Mom's posture change. She straightened her jacket, arranged her pearls, and smiled the smile she'd practiced for decades. She didn't know yet that this was not a seminar. About 30 people showed up, neighbors, church members, the bank manager, the PTA president, the reporter, and a couple of old family friends. I started the meeting in my usual dry accountant voice. Today we'll talk about red flags in household finances. The bank manager produced a folder and began to talk about identity theft in the abstract. Then I asked him to step outside with me for a moment. He came. So did Mom and Dad, who had followed, alarmed. I handed the bank manager a copy of the forged loan, the letter with Mom's cursive, and the call logs that proved Alina had answered as Rachel. He read through them without expression, then looked at Mom. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Without the armor, she was hollow. I filed a police report this morning, I said. I've also sent copies of these documents to the PTA, the neighborhood association, and the church board. The bank is rescinding the loan and pursuing charges for fraud and identity theft. I've retained counsel and will be pursuing a civil suit for damages. If you'd like to resign from the PTA and the committee before the board meets, you're welcome to do so with dignity. Silence cracked the air. Someone in the back muttered. The reporter's pen scratched faster. Mom's face went white as old paper. Dad stammered something about misunderstanding, then sat down hard on the nearest chair like a man who'd been struck. And then I did something I'd rehearsed 100 times in my head, but never dared to actually do. I told the whole room the story about Daniel and the letter, about how my mother had paid him to leave, how she'd fabricated a confession to his face, how she'd intercepted outreach from my biological father. I laid out, calmly and plainly, the motive that had been beating under her cruelty: possession. Linda had spent a lifetime making her world unassailable. To her, a secret father, a volatile lover, a truth no one else knew, those were threats to that world. She had decided it was easier to ruin people than to risk being ruined. People in the room looked at her differently after that. Some were stunned, some were angry. A woman from the PTA whispered to the reporter, and he clicked his phone open. The neighbor who used to bake pies for bake sales covered her mouth with trembling fingers. At the end, I asked Mark to stand. He walked up and stood next to me, taller than I expected, older than the photographs I'd seen. He looked from the faces in the hall to mine, and for a moment I felt like a child again, exposed, raw, then like an adult, steady. He didn't yell. He didn't demand apologies. He simply said, "I tried to find you. I tried to write. She blocked everything. I should have kept trying." Then he looked at the room and at Mom. "I'm not here to break anyone. I just want to know my daughter." My mother's hands clenched so hard her knuckles blanched. For the first time, she couldn't control the narrative. She couldn't spin the cruelty into charity. She tried to say something about protecting a family, but her voice broke on the words. After the meeting, the local paper ran a story that made my mother disappear from the PTA roster within a week. The bank started an internal investigation and then referred the case to the district attorney's office. The DA called me in for a statement. My lawyer filed a civil suit that forced my parents to repay the forged loan balance immediately. Alina, who'd been complicit but not malicious, entered therapy and publicly apologized to me in a letter that she asked me to read before she released it. She wanted to say it in her own messy way, not under the glare of the community, and I accepted that. Daniel, who I found had sent me a letter of his own, one he'd kept private for too many years, agreed to come to dinner once, then again. He met Maya and cried in the kitchen like a man who'd been given a second chance without being promised it. The legal victories were small and practical. Loan nullified, restitution ordered. A restraining order filed when Mom tried to show up at my workplace one morning, clutching a grocery bag, and a conspiracy of apologies. But the deeper victory was quieter and colder. The people who mattered saw her for what she was, and she could no longer hide behind sacrifice or "we're family." She lost the stage she'd built her life on. She still had me in her house at Christmas. She came, as everyone does, for the theater of forgiveness, but now her words had to be earned. Now she had to ask instead of command. And the best part, the part that made the long nights and the fear worth it, was watching Maya wind the ballerina music box one evening, while Mark sat on the couch teaching her how to tie her shoes, patient and clumsy and smiling in a way I'd never seen a man smile before. He didn't try to replace anyone. He just showed up. He taught her the edges first, like he'd promised in that quiet photo he'd sent. Maya looked at me at one point and said, with the ridiculous frankness of a 5-year-old, "Dad can visit my school now, right?" I said yes. In the end, the revenge wasn't dramatic fireworks or a grand public humiliation I'd orchestrated for the sole purpose of pain. It was documentation, truth, and borders. It was taking back the part of my life that had been built out of someone else's fear. It was forcing the people who loved spectacle to face reality, and then watching them try to live inside it. My mother learned to be smaller. My father learned how to be quiet in a way that suggested regret. Alina learned that being the peacemaker is a poor trade for being honest. And I learned that the most powerful revenge is practical. Paperwork, witnesses, and a willingness to let the law and the town do what families sometimes won't. Maya fell asleep that night with the music box on her chest. I watched her breathe and felt a raw sort of relief, like a thread cut and the rest of the fabric finally lying flat. I thought then of all the ways I'd been taught to bow, to finance, to appearances, to guilt. I thought of the small, stubborn thing inside me that finally refused. When I locked the front door, I glanced back one more time at the empty porch and thought, some fences need rebuilding, some doors need locks, and some people need to learn how to miss the life they tried to steal. The rest I left to the paperwork.